Welcome to the Mental Insights Podcast, a conversation aimed at understanding all sides of mental health, addiction recovery, and homelessness. Each interview will include one's personal experiences and insights, or an expert's advice and knowledge within one of these fields. The goal is to promote awareness, guidance, and support for anyone who is affected by these challenges. Thank you all for listening. Welcome to the Mental Insights Podcast. This is your host, brendan.cutuli, and we're here today for Season 2, Episode number 21 with Dr. Shawn Horn. Dr. Shawn Horn is a licensed psychologist in Spokane, Washington, with over 27 years of experience in the mental health field. Shawn is the host of the Inspired Living podcast, which brings the wisdom of the therapy room by sharing insights, experience, and expert knowledge. Shawn joins the Mental Insights podcast to speak about shame and how it's related in terms of generational differences. So, Shawn, thank you for taking this time to speak with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I sent that to you a while ago, and since then, a new thing we can add to it is I'm a new TEDx speaker.
Really? And when does that come out? So we'll have that linked below for everybody to see.
Yeah, I get to speak on October 10th, so I'm so excited. I hope that the virus is somewhat resolved so we can do it in live versus
Absolutely.
recording. But yeah, new TEDx
TEDx
opportunity. So exciting.
That is awesome. Congratulations. And
Thank
we'll
you.
definitely be sure to have that below in the show notes for anybody to see as that transpires and moves forward.
Thank you.
To really start off, speaking about the topic of shame, it definitely brings about many different perspectives and factors in terms of what we can really talk about, but to really bring a broad, definition and understanding of it, can you explain what shame is and kind of explain the difference of shame and guilt? I think would be a good stepping stone for this conversation.
Yes, good starting point. Because it is so confusing for everyone, especially as we got all these different people talking about it and using different language to describe it. And so it's really helpful to clarify. So first, I want to say that there is a healthy shame. There is a healthy shame that we do want to have. We do want to foster in that it develops our consciousness. So it's really a conviction. When you do something that your consciousness says, stop. It's a strong alert, different than guilt and different than anything else, because it's a firm no. It's a firm stop right now. What you're doing is going to hurt you or harm other people, and it needs to be eliminated. So we want to have that. If we didn't have it, we would be psychopaths, quite frankly. We just wouldn't care. We wouldn't have empathy. We wouldn't have appropriate behavior. We could break rules and laws and lie and cheat and do all those kinds of things. So we really do want to have that alarm system inside our body. And I think traditionally when people used to use the term shame on you, they were trying to say have conviction so that you can correct this and not repeat this harmful behavior. So what I'm addressing is the toxic shame, which is really a message that goes south on us, because the conviction part is giving us information about behavior. It's separating the identity from the behavior, saying that you're fine, you're a human being just like all of us, but this thing that you did or this behavior that's going on, it needs to be corrected. But in toxic shame, it becomes a new statement that no longer is it okay that I just made a mistake or that my behavior was bad. I am bad. I am a mistake. I am fatally flawed, different from others. And for that reason, something is really wrong with me. And so it gets attached to our identity in a way that begins to inhibit us. It begins to oppress us. And it really does lie to us. It has this horrible internal voice that is constantly putting us down and criticizing us. And the thing that I find really interesting about shame is that it is a social emotion. We can be fine on our own and then be fine with our interests and our talents and whatever. But when we go in front of another person and we express that talent and they give a disapproval response, and then we go, oh no, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. It was really awful. We experienced that shame emotion. So shame then compels us to want to withdraw and to curl up and to hide that part in us that we feel the other has disapproved of. So shame comes from a social context where it is given to us through a trauma, a relational trauma, or something we vicariously witness where people are bullied or they're put down or they were given really high standards that they could not achieve, unrealistic expectations. So, in the shame psychology research, we say that we get shamed from our early childhood experiences. When we look to our parents and teachers and peers and siblings, and we say, who am I? Am I likable? Am I lovable? Do I belong? Am I worthy? And how that adult treated us or didn't treat us becomes these seeds that we plant in our heart about our identity. So if we have parents that never said, I love you, then I'm unlovable. If we have people tell us we're ugly or we're fat or we're stupid, these things become our identity. And so they internalize and become the inward voice inside of us that we are constantly hearing. So our head can say, oh no, I'm intelligent, but inside you're like, no, you're not, you're so stupid. It's that imposter syndrome that we get that's always putting us down. So I really feel it's so important for us to expose the lie of shame because it is oppressing us, it hinders us, it covers us with this veil that keeps us from being the person we were designed to be. And so guilt is one of those words that often gets interchanged with toxic shame and conviction. It's somewhat confusing because really guilt is a conviction. So we can even break it down between healthy guilt and toxic guilt, because a lot of times we can feel guilty about something that wasn't ours, wasn't our responsibility. We didn't cause it, we didn't do it, but yet we feel vicariously guilty for it. And then that would fall under the category of toxic shame. So, but if it is that I did something, I lied, I feel guilty, I lied, then that's a conviction. So maybe it's a softer version of shame, like, ooh, not really good, versus shame being stop, having a little firmer directive to it.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it because it is something that needs to be considered before we do step into this conversation about how much of an impact it has within relationships, not only with parental figures, partners, children, but even yourself is where kind of this comes into play. And, speaking about how this kind of relationship with yourself, it's really like you're saying, it's about that ego, about, within yourself of trying to dissolve that and trying not to have these repercussions of your experiences. And I think when someone experiences this, it's kind of just come into play of it always happens. And whenever you hear maybe even if it's not necessarily directed at you in a harmful way, it could be something that whether you're a child or a partner, you hear this as a form of shame and it kind of gets internalized in that way. And for someone who experiences this, how can they hear someone's thoughts or someone's, you know, perceptions about what's going on without feeling this shame throughout, their everyday?
hmm I'm so glad you brought this up because you brought up two really important points for us to touch on. One about clarifying the ego, and the other point about this concept of being shame free. I realized after I did a series of videos on the Shame Sister Show, which is on YouTube, and I talked about shame and I shared my own shame stories. And we recorded this during COVID. And afterwards, I had a really strong shame reaction. And I thought, whoa, where is that coming from? And I was embarrassed. I wanted to withdraw. I was like, oh my gosh, I put that out there. And it's not the first time, but I haven't had put it out there before to such a large audience. And so I had that reaction. And then it dawned on me that I've been talking about being shame free, and it might be confusing to people because you get this idea that somehow I'll resolve my shame, I'll process it, I'll work through it, and then I won't have that shame experience anymore. And that's not how it works. We will experience shame. It's a human emotion. So we will experience it until the day we die. The difference is whether we grab hold of it and we cling to it and we believe it. So what we want to do is when we experience shame and the trigger of shame is just see it like a big stormy cloud that is passing us in the sky. Like, oh, yep, there it is, and just let it keep passing. But ground yourself in the here and now, and ground yourself in the truth that I am okay. I'm flawed. I'm defective, just like every other human being around me. I am no different than anyone else. So yes, I feel this inside. It doesn't feel good, but it will pass, and I'm okay. I'm okay, even though the shame is telling me I'm not okay. So you cheerlead yourself through it. You talk yourself through it instead of reacting like, oh no, this is my truth. So when I had that discomfort, I acknowledged it. Yeah, that was really vulnerable. That was really transparent. And yes, there may be people that judge me, and that just is the way it is. But that's okay because I no longer put value in their judgment of me. I now make peace with myself, and I now have my own sense of being able to direct and guide my sense of self versus letting the outside world, being so dependent on the outside world, if they are supporting me or not supporting me, if they say I'm good enough or not good enough, it no longer am I putting that job in their hands because they can't. If I had a job description out there, they would not meet the job criteria. So no one can hold the responsibility to define your value and your worth, and do not put that in human hands. So we really want to have that strategy with shame of just re-grounding ourselves and helping ourselves through it. But the second point you brought up, which is the ego, I want to highlight because really what an ego state is, I call a shame shield. So they are the identities that we attach to that we use to convince the world that we really are okay. So let's say I had body shame. And it could have been directly, it could have been a family member telling me that my body wasn't okay, or people pointing out how clothing fit me, or I'm in a community where I hear other people talking about people's bodies or TV and things like that. So somehow I adopted this that if I had the perfect body, then the world would love me. Then I would be wanted, I would be included, I would belong, and I would have all of the opportunities that come with that privilege. So then I would attach to a body shield. And there's two different ways. We could either attach to it in a success or to attach to it in a failed experience of it. So a success would be someone who attains their ideal that they think is an ideal. They have the right body shape, size, muscles, whatever. And so then that is their identity. I am a fitness guru. That is who I am, and therefore I'm valuable. Or it could be the person that's constantly chasing that down with every diet in the book, every method in the book, and never being good enough, never reaching that standard, but constantly thinking that is what's going to give them their identity. So ego states can be a shield with career. My career defines me, my body defines me, beauty, affiliations, my friends who I'm associated with, material possessions, what do I own that would show the world I have the right house, the right car, the right clothes? These types of things we attach to get that message that I'm okay. So part of healing shame is we have to step out of the painting so we can see the painting and realize that these shields that we've attached to do not define our worth, and they will fail us in every way. And even though our brain is telling us they won't, and really work on ungluing ourselves from those. And it will be hard and challenging because we did attach to it throughout our lifetime. So there could be times that we get activated and triggered when we encounter someone who has that ego shield, and they are promoting that, oh yes, I have this car, and you've been working so hard at not valuing that car. It can trigger and get activated, but you just know, hey, that's not the truth. That's not what I'm attaching to. And so I'm going to observe it, and I'm going to ground myself and just really do that self talk. I'm okay. Doesn't define me. This is what my value is.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. It shows how much of an internalization this process is but I also think that there can be repercussions in terms of the relationships that you have around with other people. And could you speak about some of the challenges that can come into place, whether it's parents, whether it's partners? How can shame really direct a challenge within the relationships that you have with other people, not only being an internalized, challenge within yourself?
Oh, great question. It really, as we do our recovery work in AA groups and stuff, they say sometimes you have to change your playground and your playmates. You begin to change your affiliations when you are in the shame shield, let's say, of materialism, and you begin to separate from that and start to value other things. You're going to notice that you're not as engaged with these individuals or pursuing the same things or interested in the same conversations. So you begin to change where you hang out and who you hang out with. But there are some relationships that we can't change, our family, for one. And so with these, it can be especially challenging. And what we talk about in shame psychology is this thing called shame dumping. And what shame dumping is let's say I have been told that if I was a good parent, my children would be good children, and it would look like whatever they paint a picture. I have a kid that's the Nordstrom's a poster child, going off to Harvard, whatever. And this is, if I was a good, intelligent parent, my kid would be this way. They would have this political view, they would have this appearance, and so forth, right? But then children are not an extension of parents, and it doesn't work that way. You can be the best a parent, and your child can come out reflecting otherwise, and you can be the worst a parent, and your child could come out reflecting the otherwise. I tell parents, guard from personalizing your child's exercise of free will. We all have free will. And so we have to recognize that we're raising these separate individuals that have their own path, and we have just a short time to influence it, but that's it. So but shame bound parents will see their kids as this extension. So let's say they're with their kid, and all of a sudden their kid makes a choice that that parent was told was not okay. Let's say they want to grow their hair out, and the parent was taught that was people that grew their hair out were hippies or were irresponsible or whatever. So now parent gets angry and they react at the kid. So that's shame dumping. How could you do that? And you need to be clean, and you're going to be a total loser out there like that, looking like that. You need to clean up your act. And so they start to be very critical and trying to influence the kid to go in a certain direction. And the kid gets so angry, why doesn't my parent accept me? Why would they think such a idiotic idea? They think their parents are so foolish for holding on to these ideas. And so now we have these big conflictual conversations. So what's helpful to know in that moment is the principle that how people treat us is more to do with them. It's more how someone responds. It's our own process. And so we are not responsible for other people's behavior and other people's feelings. So we need to guard from personalizing those moments, from saying, oh no, they're doing this to me. They're not doing it to you. They're doing it to a perception of what you represent in their mind, what your actions represent for them, and really their fears that they have learned from being shamed, that if you do this thing, somehow you're going to be harmed and you're going to have a disadvantage, and they're going to be harmed and have a disadvantage. So shame, in some ways, toxic shame, the inner critic, is really trying to protect us. It's really trying to say, don't do that thing, because if you do that thing, you're going to get kicked off the island. And for our survival, we have to have our tribe. So do not do that thing. And so it's trying to protect us, but it's doing it in this really problematic way, which is so oppressing. I think of coaches. If you have a coach that's berating their players, or a coach that's building up their players and giving them guidance and giving them correction where it's needed, you're going to have better performance with the loving, kind, compassionate, empathic guidance than you have that critical, berating, rejecting guidance. So I advocate that we move from an inner critic to an inner guidance. and which is just the difference in how it's being delivered, that message. So when our parents and other people treat us with this intense shaming response, it's helpful to recognize that that's theirs. Their shame got activated and they're scared, and to hold compassion for that journey. Somewhere in their journey, they learn the message that this is harmful to themselves and to others. And ultimately, they don't want me harmed. And that's why they're saying this to me. I don't agree with it, and I can accept that difference. I can agree to disagree, but they may not. So I can move towards that parent or that loved one and say, I love you. And I realize you're saying this to me because you love me and you care about me and you're concerned and you're scared. But I do disagree with this. And I recognize that we won't be on the same page with it. But I want you to know it's going to be okay. If they're receptive. Some listeners might look at that and say, yeah, try that with my dad and my mom and see how that goes, right? But if it goes south, just hold compassion. That will help you get through the storm of being in relationship with them.
Wonderful. Yeah, I wanted to speak about it because there certainly is parents that aren't going to be receptive in that regard. And internally, all you can really do is go within yourself. And as you're saying, try to hold that compassion. And for some people, they may be listening, they may experience shame, and then they may understand that they have to hold this compassion as they're experiencing this, as they're living in an environment that they're probably going to be a recurring aspect of experiencing the shame. Are there any activities, or is there anything, as you stated earlier, to step outside that box, to try to look at it from a different perspective? What can someone be doing to try to, gain some more of this compassion, gain some more of this perspective to say, all right, this is not truly what they think. I need to, look within myself to try to, understand a little bit more about how they're treating me and how I should treat myself.
Yeah, so two antidotes to shame is one is compassion, holding compassion for self and others. And the other one is to feel connected to the human race in a way that is relatable. And when I first heard that, I immediately thought of AA and things and churches and fellowships and things where people could go in and have this common ground where they can share their struggles, they can share their weaknesses and so forth, and have other people go, me too, I have the same experience, and to collectively share that empathic understanding and compassion for one another. It's so healing. The one of my the co-host, that Nicole Mishke, who does Shame Uncovered, she talks about how one of her biggest shames she hid was being bulimia. And so one day she finally took a stage and she shared a story about being bulimic, which she never thought she would ever do. And yet it was the most healing thing she ever did. And the reason why I believe that was so healing is because shame told her, if you come forward and you say you're bulimic, you will be fundamentally rejected. You're not going to have your friends, your family, your community. You will have that scarlet letter on you and have to walk naked through the middle of town, right? And instead, she was embraced, and with people saying, thank you for sharing that story. Thank you. You freed me. Now I can share my story. And that is the contagious effect we find when we get vulnerable and transparent. And when we say, look, I'm really struggling with this, people then come forward, go, thank you, me too. And it helps them heal as well. And so this is where it's really important for us to move from shame based communities over to grace based communities. And those are ones that just accept that we are perfectly imperfect. They understand that we struggle and that's okay. And they're focused on problem solutions, or solutions to problems, versus appearance management. They do problem management. So there is a gentleness and a kindness. So it's important for us to search for those communities. Sometimes when I'm talking to Christian communities, I'll talk about the difference between shame-based and grace-based churches. And shame-based churches being very rejecting, very do not sin, do not let people know this, cover your struggles, versus grace-based says, hey, how can we help you? How can we love on you? They pull you in versus kicking you out of the church because you were human. They pull you in this loving support, and they champion for you. And so that's what we want. We want to find people who understand that judgment harms ourselves and others, and that we really do need to be supportive and present for one another. So if we are in a shame-based community, and as an adult, we have the freedoms to step out and begin searching for those communities of people that can accept us. And that is found in the community in different uh, support groups, whether it's 12-step groups, different faith groups, different interest groups, different meetup groups where you find similar interests, where people want to have those transparent conversations. Follow podcasts and people on social media that are sharing, that are being transparent, saying, this is my story. And you can start to see that that exists out there, and you can find it, but beginning to make that journey, because part of healing that shame is getting that other to really extend that compassion to us, so we know that it is safe and we're not going to get kicked out of the tribe or off the island for this thing. If it's toxic shame. Now, there is some, like we also say, check the facts. There is some shame that if people did come forward, they would get rejection, like if they did commit a crime or they were dangerous. So in that case, they do need to seek the proper treatment and help to make sure that they aren't engaging in dangerous behaviors and so forth.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought all that up, because it did lead into something that I wanted you to touch on from, both sides of shame, being the impact of an environment, the impact of community, and what kind of impact can the environment and community have on our healing. So if we're experiencing shame, what really impact can an environment have on the way we heal through this process?
It can have a profound effect when we are given that support, because we are given that message that we're given a different voice to plant different seeds in our heart. So the other one was rejecting and giving us all that inner criticism. But when we have the loving voice that says, no, I love you and I accept you just the way you are. And of course, they're not going to be perfect. They're going to have a moment where they don't act loving or they say something insensitive, but they will be accountable to their actions. They're willing to have those conversations, to be humble and say, how may I attend to this? And so when you are given that extended to you, then you weave that into your new understanding of yourself, that that is possible. As a therapist, I hear so often people saying that what they grew up in, they just thought was that's the way it was. And then all of a sudden they encounter a different experience and it's shocking to them. They never knew that that kind of kindness or love or safety could exist. And it really rewrites our worldview about things. And often this is when you see someone given something really gracious and they weep, and you think, why are they weeping? And in that moment, they are so touched that they're given this love. And at the same time, they're so conscious that that was withheld from them throughout their life. So there's a grief and loss along with this joyful embrace that exists together at the same time. And so this is a dialectic philosophy that opposites can occur together. We can be strong and weak at the same time. And this is really a healing mindset to adopt, because part of shame takes us into black and white thinking. I'm either a success or I'm a failure. Either they're safe or they're unsafe, versus understanding that it's all of that. We're wonderful and we're challenging, and people can be very safe and have unsafe moments. And so when we understand that all weather exists underneath the sky, the same is true for our life. And then we can flow and be more in process, rather than be in this destination mindset, like I'll arrive and it's done and I will get there and then I'll be happy. That doesn't work. Life is about the process, not the end result. And so once we can embrace that and flow like water, like wind, and flow with life, and work in relationship with it, in relationship with that journey, then we find inner peace and we can find joy in being present and mindful and in movement in each day.
Wonderfully said, Shawn. I greatly appreciate that. I think it's something that a lot of people do struggle with in terms of shame, is thinking that it's the end result, thinking that I'm either this or that, and there's no in between. And I like that correlation in terms of how you can, relate it to your own life, because we're multiple different aspects of, having different emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, and we need to come in acceptance to that, and we're not always going to be one way or the other, and that completely shows in exactly what you stated.
Yes. I always say every day comes with a new opportunity for hope. And so when you wake up, it's a new day. Get up, dust off, and we try again. And then we learn from whatever it is we need to learn from. And then we wake up, we dust off, we start again. And that is a masterful way of approaching it.
It certainly is, and it's a great way to go about it and to take that step. And I think having the right perspective of trying to achieve that in your own life. So, for this first part of the episode, I want to thank you for taking this time, and for everybody listening. And be sure to tune in to the next part of this episode. We'll be speaking more about generational shame and more about what you can take in order to heal throughout the shame that you may be experiencing today. So thank you all for listening, and thank you for being here, Shawn.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening to today's episode of the Mental Insights Podcast. Make sure to reach out to today's guest or myself if you need any advice, guidance, or support in your life today. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and review to this podcast so we know what you thought of this episode. I look forward to being in touch with you all in the next episode. I hope you all have a wonderful day.